Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the Squadron Supreme Classic Omnibus. I should note that there's two Omnibus out right now with the Squadron Supreme title. The classic version, which contains all the stuff leading up to the miniseries and all of their appearances up to Secret Wars. And another version of this Omnibus that only collects this miniseries. So if you're interested in this, definitely check out the classic Omnibus. It will have this cover. Both Omnibus are going for the same price, but this one contains a lot more than that smaller one does. And you get more bang for your buck regardless. So last month, Marvel announced that there's going to be a reboot of the Heroes Reborn concept coming out, where the Squadron Supreme is Earth's premier team. I figured in anticipation of that, we should probably go over who the team is and talk a little bit about their origin, while also going over the contents of this omnibus and doing a quick overview. Before we get into that overview, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you know exactly when I get new content out there. Alright guys, we got the Squadron Supreme Omnibus. I already went ahead and took off the dust jacket just so we could see the whole thing as one. So there's the spine, and here's the back cover that showcases all the issues that are collected in this omnibus. This omnibus specifically just showcases the Squadron Supreme from Earth 712. They do have some crossover with the rebooted Squadron Supreme from the Supreme Power universe. And it only slightly showcases some of the Squadron Sinister, which is an evil version of the Squadron Supreme. I'll bring this closer so you can pause it and see what it contains. This omnibus does retail for $125, but this omnibus has been so under the radar and not in demand that you could usually find it for around 50 bucks. And as I said earlier, there is a version of this omnibus that contains only the miniseries right here. This issues 1 through 12 of Squadron Supreme from 1985. But for around the same price, you could get this entire epic all collected in one. Here is the inside cover. A cool wraparound cover, all one solid image. That comes from the Kurt Busiek run of Avengers. I believe it's the first annual from that series. Let's take a look at some of the specs. Here's the spine. When we lay it out, you can see that there is actually a really good eye on that, so these books do not rip pages very easily, at least through the spine. And just because of the style and the era of this book, there's not a whole lot of splash pages, so it's really hard to determine what the gutter loss is like, but from reading this a couple of times over, I could tell you that the gutter loss is minimal to none. So this omnibus actually starts with us meeting the Squadron Sinister in the pages of Avengers by Sal Buscema and Roy Thomas. Eventually we'll see that the Squadron Sinister is just an evil analog of the Squadron Supreme, which in itself is an analog of the Justice League, so it's a derivative of a derivative, which sounds kind of crazy, but when you read the story it actually plays out pretty good. So the Avengers are pitted against the Squadron Sinister to begin by Kang and some of the cosmic forces in the Marvel Universe. The Grandmaster. It's later in issues 85 and 86 where we see the actual Squadron Supreme proper come into play. Some of the Avengers are accidentally transported to their planet and see a great disaster happening. When they run into the Squadron Supreme, they think it's the Squadron Sinister, but once they figure out, that these guys are actually on the level and actually are good guys trying to help their Earth, the Squadron Supreme and the Avengers team up to take on the threat that's going to destroy their planet. Ultimately, what this series is doing right now is laying the groundwork for the miniseries. We see more appearances by the Squadron Supreme in pages of the Defenders and Thor. It's in the pages of Avengers and Defenders that we get a little bit more of the characters fleshed out from the Squadron Supreme, such as characters like Hyperion, Dr. Spectrum, Golden Archer, Lady Lark, Captain Hawk, Whizzer, Amphibian, Tom Thumb, Arcana, Wonder Woman, and Nighthawk. All of them who are analogs for Justice League characters. For example, Nighthawk being like Batman, Warrior Woman being Wonder Woman, and a very obscure one, Arcana, being similar to Zatanna. Basically, all you have to know going into the miniseries is that Nighthawk has been stuck on 616 universe, the main Marvel universe. He's also the president of the Squadron Supreme universe, so that's kind of an important key point. And the Squadron Supreme's universe's politics are getting out of hand to the point where the Squadron Supreme are probably going to have to take over regardless if they want to or not. Now, without going into too much detail about what this miniseries is, I want to talk about how this came out 1 year before Watchmen did, and is often compared to Watchmen as an underrated series. While it doesn't have Alan Moore's finesse, and it kind of plays more like a standard comic book at the time, it definitely deals with similar themes. The Squadron Supreme reluctantly takes over the Earth because they're worried about the current political climate, they're worried about global warming, they want to eradicate disease, and they even want to eradicate death altogether. Basically, this analog of the Justice League is tired of the human condition and wants to control the aspect of humanity to its core for its own betterment. You could say it's pretty similar concepts to Omnibus from Watchmen, but instead of it being an individual, it's an entire team of people going along with this. Obviously, there's dissenters like Darkhawk, who actually creates his own version of the Squadron Supreme to take on the Squadron, comprised of villains from this universe. So kind of a Legion of Doom Suicide Squad scenario with those guys. Every issue has its own take on a political and contemporary topic at the time, and we see characters deal with the struggle of the morality of their decisions. It's a really interesting series because it just definitely asks the same kind of questions Watchmen does, but just in a little bit more of a standard traditional comic book setting. And like a lot of the derivative offbeat comic books that were based off of other comic books, you could say this one's kind of a satire on the medium as a whole. So this series can be read on its own, but it does also cross over into the Captain America by Mark Grunwald, the same writer as this miniseries. Here's the cover to the crossover. This takes place right after issue 8, I believe, where we see Nighthawk go to the 616 universe to try and recruit heroes that he's teamed up with before to help him take back his country on his own planet. He's getting desperate to get things back to normal, and he's genuinely worried about the direction the Squadron Supreme is taking the Earth. But Mark Grunwald actually revisited the concept of his ending in Squadron Supreme, the miniseries, in Marvel Comics graphic novel The Squadron Supreme years later. Marvel graphic novels was a line that was made more like a one-shot comic book series. In it, we see the Squadron Supreme get a visit from one of their arch enemies who's warning them about their planet's destruction. Ultimately, they have to team up with him to try and figure out how to save their planet. I would almost say that this is like the 13th issue of the miniseries, because reading the miniseries and this back-to-back is almost essential just to get the complete story. I'd say this is pretty similar to a Crisis event from DC Comics, and I think that's what Mark Grunwald was going for. So, an interesting little fact about Mark Rummel, he actually passed away shortly after his run on Quasar, and in his will, he asked that he be part of what he loved so much. He loved working on comic books. He was known as the continuity man who knew everything about Marvel's continuity, and he just lived for comic books. So what his wife did was, she added some of his ashes to the reprint trade paperback of Squadron Supreme. So a little fun fact, if you have a copy of the 1997 Squadron Supreme tough paperback, you have a little bit of Mark Grunwald in your home. Take that as you will, but you can't say he wasn't dedicated to his craft. So the Quasar issues that take place in this Omnibus actually take place after the miniseries and the death of the Squadron Supreme's universe, where they're stranded on the 616 universe and join a group called Project Pegasus. And they spend years stuck on the 616 universe, where they team up with Quasar, the Avengers, and a bunch of other heroes pretty regularly for years on end. It's not until after the Kurt Busiek run of Avengers that we see the Squadron Supreme return to their Earth after they figure out that it hasn't been destroyed. Once we get to the Kurt Busiek run of Avengers, we definitely get a transition period where they come off as kind of an arrogant team trying to take on the Avengers just because they don't believe the Avengers are who they say they are. The Avengers before this series have been missing for a year. They were stuck in the Heroes Reborn universe. So the Squadron Supreme thinks that they're either Skrulls or some kind of robot imposters. They come off a little bit more arrogant than they were in the previous series by Mark Grunwald. But ultimately, they come to an understanding, and the Avengers eventually help them find out that their Earth is still around and help them figure out how to get home. And that series where they head home is called Squadron Supreme: The New World Order, which unfortunately Mark Grunwald did not write, but the writer of this series definitely paid homage to everything that Mark Grunwald did beforehand. We find out everything's not as doom and gloom as they previously thought, so they're able to come back home and help right some of their wrongs. So getting towards the end of this omnibus, we have some Exiles crossover, which Exiles was a team of heroes, mostly mutants from the X-Men and alternate universe X-Men, who team up together to help right and correct things throughout the multiverse. So, for example, we have Sabretooth from the Age of Apocalypse, Spider-Man 2099, crossing paths with the Squadron Supreme. In this crossover, we get to check in with the Squadron Supreme and see how their lives are going ever since they returned to their Earth. The storyline doesn't dwell on how they're actually coping with the changes in their lives too much. It's more of just about the crossover with the Exiles. But at least we get to see a glimpse of what's happening in this universe. So the last part of this omnibus does require a little bit of explanation. So Ultimate Power was a mini-series that showed the Ultimate Marvel Universe crossing over with the Supreme Power Universe. If you're not familiar with the Supreme Power Universe, it was a version of the Squadron Supreme that was supposed to be more grounded in reality. As the series was coming out, it was well regarded. mostly because it took a very mature stance on the Squadron Supreme and based it in a post-9/11 world. There's a lot of big concepts in the series, but ultimately the series didn't pay off too much because it didn't wrap up properly. So this drops us right in the middle of this crossover with issue 7. And the reason why it does that is because this omnibus doesn't talk about the Supreme Power Universe all that much, and definitely not the Ultimate Universe all that much. In this issue and moving forward, we see the Squadron Supreme come over and cross over with the Ultimate Marvel Universe and the Supreme Power Universe. I'll be honest, I probably talked about this series a little bit too much so far because honestly this is one of the worst comic book series that I've ever read, and I hate saying that out loud. A lot of people give Greg Land, the artist on this comic book series, a hard time because he reuses a lot of his art. My problem's not too much with the reuse of the art, it's mostly just the sloppiness of the writing. The ultimate reason why these people are fighting is kind of a cop-out reason, and the Squadron Supreme only appear in this because of coincidence, really. Basically, I think that these issues were collected in this omnibus just for the completionists. It is technically an appearance by the original Squadron Supreme, so it is kind of nice that they included it. I would always feel like they should have included it, to be honest. Not that I'm ever going to reread this section. I feel like I'm really harping on this, and I'm really trying not to, but it's just not a good story. So a lot of cool stuff going into this, especially even with the Exiles, but wrapping up with this is definitely going out with a whimper and not a bang. If the Ultimate Power series didn't exist and it ended on Exiles, I think this would have been an awesome way to wrap up the omnibus. Some of the bonus material we have in the back is creator commentary, people who have worked with Mark Grunwald or just on the Squadron Supreme. There's a lot of that because there's a lot of love for this series within the industry itself. Then we get some editorials from Marvel Age. We often see a lot of Marvel Age in these kind of omnibus. Some short comics from those editorials. If you see an omnibus for Squadron Supreme with this cover, this is the cover to the one that only collects the miniseries. So again, if you want the entire thing and more than just the miniseries, make sure you're looking for that cover. And that's a wrap, guys. Before we wrap up, I do like to give recommendations. So my first recommendation is going to be Jonathan Hickman's Avengers run. If you're a fan of Squadron Supreme in their form that we just went over, they loosely rebooted the concept for Jonathan Hickman's New Avengers and Avengers run. In Jonathan Hickman's run on Avengers, we see the Squadron face off with the Avengers, Hyperion joins the Avengers, and we see what happens in the Time Runs Out event that leads up to Secret Wars. You can collect New Avengers and Avengers in hardback, paperback, complete collections, and there are omnibus of them, but they're very expensive because they've been out of print for a while, so you're probably better off getting the hardcovers or the paperbacks. More recently, a new version of the Squadron Supreme appeared in Jason Aaron's Avengers run. In it, we see the Squadron Supreme working directly for Washington, D.C. and the U.S. government, so they're often referred to as DC's heroes, playing on how they're derivative of the Justice League characters from DC Comics. Most likely because Jason Aaron is writing the Heroes Reborn series coming out later this year, and this series will see a direct connection from this series to Heroes Reborn. Personally, I'm very excited to see Squadron Supreme join Marvel's main continuity. The team has a rich history and some excellent stories that I feel like are often pushed to the wayside or just forgotten about. I want to thank you guys again for watching, and if you do like what you see, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. It's time to jump off the Omnibus.